Hello, good evening. You're watching Times Now. I'm Shreya Upadhyay. Our top story tonight, viewers. American President Donald Trump has ordered 2,000 National Guard troops to take control of the situation in Los Angeles as the violent unrest entered its second day. The Paramount area in LA has been witnessing clashes between protesters and personnel of the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE or ICE, over raids on undocumented immigrants. What began as an operation near a Home Depot to arrest illegal immigrants with criminal backgrounds ended up expanding to more people being checked for allegedly being history cheaters. As many as 118 arrests were made in LA this week as a result of ICE operations, including 44 people on Friday. Residents who are dominantly Latinos took to the streets demanding ICE to go back, and they were pelting stones at the Border Patrol personnel as well, visuals of which have now gone viral. Now, even as this entire unrest was unfolding, a war of words erupted between Republican Trump administration and Democrats who govern California. While Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller emphasized on law and order and what they called taking America back, Democrat California Governor Gavin Newsom called the troop deployment as purposefully inflammatory. When Secretary Hegseth said that U.S. Marines are on standby, the governor accused him of displaying deranged behavior. In fact, Miller also called the situation as an insurrection against the laws and sovereignty of the United States. Now, the U.S. president has thanked the troops on ground while slamming demonstrators for hiding their faces behind masks, asking why the masks, what's there to hide? This latest flashpoint, remember, comes amid the Trump administration intensifying its crackdown on illegal immigrants, with many accusing the government of arresting people without any reason. Let's try and decode this entire situation and the violent unrest that has been witnessed in Los Angeles. I'm joined by David Sofair, he's a Republican strategist. Richard Painter, former chief White House ethics lawyer for President George W. Bush, is also joining us, as well as Sarah Spector, attorney and Democrat analyst. Good evening and namaskar to all of you. Before I get the Republican and Democrat perspective, Richard Painter, I want to ask you what you make of this entire situation. The argument that's been given is that, look, the Trump administration had made it clear from day one that it will be cracking down on illegal immigrants. So why these protests?
Well, I'm not going to get into the substance, the merits of the dispute between the protesters and the federal government. But the bottom line is that protesters who are violent, who interfere with federal agents in the performance of their duties, can and should be arrested and prosecuted, and if they're found guilty, incarcerated. We cannot tolerate violence on our streets. That's the most important thing here. But another issue that is very, very important is that the President of the United States should not use the military for domestic law enforcement absent an insurrection. This is not an insurrection. These are a handful of criminal protesters who are not peaceful, who are throwing stones, who need to be arrested, and they can be arrested by federal law enforcement. The president has at his disposal the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, the FBI, ICE itself, immigration enforcement officers that have plenty of firepower to deal with this situation, and so can and should the California State Patrol, and, if necessary, the National Guard under the command of the governor of California. The President of the United States should not be federalizing the National Guard in this situation. It is not an insurrection under the terms clearly defined in the Insurrection Act.
Okay, you make pertinent points, Richard Painter. Let me take this across to Sarah Spector. Sarah, in this entire situation, what's the problem? The fact that the Trump administration is cracking down on illegal immigrants unapologetically, or is the problem the implementation of this crackdown, the fact that there are several innocents who have been picked up, the fact that the Trump administration is not giving habeas corpus without actually suspending it constitutionally? The president has gone ahead and exercised the kind of power that he has. What is the problem when there was clarity that, yes, the Trump administration will be cracking down on illegal immigrants?
Well, it's definitely the implementation. The problem is that I think a lot of people were thinking that he was going to focus on violent people that are in this country illegally. And at least where I live in Midland, Texas, they've been taking people who have been in this country for decades working in tortillerias, which is basically Mexican bakeries, nonviolent people, and just doing raids on random restaurants. They have a quota of 3,000 people, and they're dressing up, in mass. They don't have badges on. They're coming in and they're grabbing people, and they're inflaming communities all over, Latino communities all over the United States.
But you know, Sarah, you've also got the White House posting about people who have been picked up, who have had criminal cases against them, who have, had these charges of rape as well as sexual assault and other serious criminal charges against them.
Look, right, they have done. Are you asking me? Sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah. Then I'll go to David Sofer. You go first, Sarah.
There have been many people that have violent criminal histories that should be that they have gotten, but the problem is Cohen, who is counsel to the president, he has made a quota now of 3,000 people a day to be detained, which is almost impossible. They're not going to be able to find 3,000 violent criminals a day. They're not going to be able to do it. And so they're just doing these massive raids, because if not, these people have been threatened. The ICE agents' jobs have been threatened if they don't make this quota. This is absolute insanity about how to run our immigration policy.
Okay, David Sofer, Sarah makes a valid point when she says that you can't be generalizing all immigrants as people with criminal backgrounds. There's also a charge against the Trump administration that they are federalizing the National Guard. What was the need for it? You're using your own security agencies against your own people who have been serving the country, by the way, and the people of America.
I mean, when you look at it, and when you back up this whole situation, I think Sarah makes actually a very bad point, but it is within the Democrat Party's talking points. Okay, this is a party that does not believe in borders, that openly hates our law enforcement, our first responders, and ICE, the immigration. So they don't want law and order, especially at the border, whether it's Kamala Harris, whether it's Gavin Newsom, whether it's, look at your heroes. They are saying,
the counter-argument, David, to this is if they don't want law and order, how is it that law and order is being breached under the Trump administration? You see the visuals that are coming out of Los Angeles.
Breached all over America, all over the Constitution. So these people are anti-constitutionalists. They do not care. And a lot of these protesters, whether it's Antifa or Black Lives Matter or this thing here, right, they're useful idiots that are backed by Democrat supergroups. And this is another prime example of it. And then when the violence gets out of control, we are very lucky to have the men and women of law enforcement, and in this case, the National Guard, go in there. But it should never have been there in the first place. This is a public safety epidemic, okay? And she's talking about Texas. Okay, well, you're very lucky to have Republican leadership on your border, protecting your hometowns and protecting the borders there. And if you look at the other guy, that the Maryland, Van Hollen, just went in there and he took out and he went to go fight an El Salvadorian criminal, a known one, called Abrego, right? This guy here, human trafficking, violence, should never been in the country in the first place. You actually had the Democrats, the radical Democrats, go down there on America's taxpayers' dollars, of course, right, and take this violent criminal and put him all over TV and all the channels and everything, and let it be found that this guy's a murderer and a kidnapper, okay? So these are the values and principles of the radical left, okay? And right now, the country of law and order, we are cleaning up democracy. And it's very pernicious to hear about public safety coming out of the radical, unsafe left, okay? So That's
Okay, I'll get Sarah to respond to you, David. Sarah, you want to go ahead?
I'd like to hear a responsible response as well.
Okay.
Okay.
When it comes to
First
safety.
of all, can I talk? First of all, hey, let me introduce myself. 17-year prosecutor, okay, under Republican and Democrats, okay? I love the Constitution, and I also love law enforcement, okay? Let me tell you, I was in Waco when George W. Bush was president, and he had the second White House, and we had a lot of protesters. I was an assistant district attorney, and we had, and they were illegally blocking streets, blocking access to the second White House. And we had orders from George W. Bush to respect the peaceful protests and do not arrest these people. Do not charge them, because he, a Republican, had respect for the right to peacefully protest and the right to peacefully assemble. You are all over the place, sir. I mean,
so this is not a peaceful protest.
Okay, Sarah, you've made your point. Sarah, you've made your point. David, you've made your point. Let me first get in Richard Painter into this. Richard, how do you see this? The fact that there have been generations of immigrants who have crossed the border. Yes, perhaps, there have been previous examples of their parents or their relatives who crossed illegally, but they have been doing largely blue-collar jobs in America. They've been contributing to the economy, and therefore, should the Trump administration be more sensitive to them?
This is a political question, with the exception of those who were born in the
This is also a humanitarian question, Mr. Painter. Yes,
this is a political question, and this is going to be resolved by the president and Congress and ultimately the courts in interpreting the immigration statutes of the United States. This is not a matter to be resolved by violent protesters. Peaceful protesters have every right to take to the streets and express their views. That's a constitutional right. Violence is not, and the violent protesters need to be arrested and prosecuted. But that is, once again, a function of federal law enforcement and also the state law enforcement. The Congress specifically prohibited the use of the military, and that includes a National Guard under the president's command, for domestic law enforcement unless there's an insurrection. This is not an insurrection. This is a few violent protesters who do need to be apprehended, but it is not an insurrection. And then we need to return to resolving the immigration issue as a political question. I would give amnesty to a lot of people who've been in this country for a long time, but that decision needs to be made by Congress and the president, not by violent protesters. And the Democrats have their views, and they should advance their views. They lost the election, and I pointed out all the problems with the Biden administration and why they needed to get their act together. They simply lost the election, and we have the government we do in Congress and with the president. But the courts will make decisions about when the president is in compliance with the law and when he is not. But I do think that the courts will tell this president, and I hope they do, that he has no right to federalize the National Guard or use the United States military unless there is an actual insurrection, which this is not.
Okay. David Sofair, then help me understand this. If the Republicans and the Trump administration are so against illegal immigrants that there is such an intense crackdown on illegals with criminal backgrounds, and by the way, nobody, I believe in America, is questioning that you are deporting those who have criminal backgrounds. It's just about generalizing it for all immigrants. But the fact of the matter is, why aren't you getting a bill for, stopping all this? Why isn't the government working on it if you're so against it?
It's not that we're against immigration. Let's be extremely clear here. The previous corrupt administration has let in over 15 to 21 million illegals that we know about. But this matter here in California is about public safety. And that is a topic that the radical left has no concern about whatsoever, okay? So here you have violence on the streets, explosions on the streets, fire on the streets. And when you peel back, who's behind this stuff? These are radical Democrat activists. Now, a lot of these people are are also lawyers. They are, state people as well. So we are cleaning this up. So it's unfortunate we had to get the National Guard in. The local police should have been in there, and Governor Newsom, should have been in there as well. This is a radical place, and you have a lot of bad actors who openly hate law and order. They openly hate democracy, and they hate ICE. So ICE is the culprit. It's bad because legalized immigration is a bad thing. We're all for immigrants. We're a country of immigrants, okay? And Donald Trump's wife is an immigrant, okay?
David,
and
can
so
I also then understand from you, how is this democracy when you've got a military veteran showing his ID at the fish market in New York where the raids happened by ICE? Despite showing the ID, he was picked up by the officials there. How is it democracy when you're lifting restrictions on sensitive locations like schools, churches, and hospitals, and so anybody can be picked in front of children or, after getting a medical treatment at hospital?
So now you're talking about felons. Sure. So now you're talking about felons, right? So, in the case of, we're taking out the worst first, right? So when you want to talk about immigration and deportation, which you're referring to, we're really going after and targeting the worst first, right? So, unfortunately or fortunately for the safety of the American people and for democracy, because we are the party of democracy, we take out people that are in wherever they are. They're not safe because the venue where they're in is irrelevant because they have committed felonies and they are not safe, and so that's what we're doing. So it's a public safety thing. So that's it. Yeah.
Okay, Sarah, there was a time when Barack Obama was the president and he was labeled as the deporter in chief because of the kind of deportations that happened under his administration. The argument that's given is when there was no problem that time and there were large-scale deportations happening that time, what's the problem now?
The lack of due process, the manner in which this is happening, I can tell you under Obama, we didn't have random raids on Latino bakeries.
Of course they did.
We didn't have random raids. We didn't. I lived here. Thank you. We didn't. He followed due process and if Obama was accused of not doing due process and a court ruled against him, you know what? He didn't criticize the court. He didn't ignore the court. So he didn't say courts don't have any authority over him. This is the constitutional crisis that we're in. Obama, if somebody reined him in, like Congress or the courts, he would listen to them and respect them. Trump is basically an authoritarian, saying the courts don't have any authority over him. Congress doesn't have any authority over him. And also Congress, we had a bill under Republican Senator Langford that would have allowed peaceful people who have been in this country to get a path to citizenship. But the Republicans refuse to even put it on the floor of the Senate.
David, come in on this. What's the problem? Follow due process, follow the constitutional process that's given in the Constitution of America. And if you want to bring in amendments, you can go through the Congress, you can follow the process to bring in amendments and then implement what you have to.
We're talking about what happened here in California, which is a very, very bad thing. It's quasi-state-sponsored, radical leftist terrorism, essentially, right? Which is a shame, which is a big theme, in the radical left, okay? And now, you're bringing up Obama, who did all these things. He was knocking on doors. He was doing the whole thing, right? But apparently he's a person that you cannot speak about because he's a radical. And, but when he does it, it's okay. So what Trump's doing is he is making America safe again. And it's a long road for America to be safe again. And what's happening in LA, the riots that have erupted there, is another key point. So it should be a good thing that we have enforcement, and there's something bigger than that's taking care of the safety of the people there, because it's not just the protesters who are selfish or the rioters. It's about the people who live in these areas that are being destroyed. So it's easy for us to say, the nuances of so-called public safety and what's right or wrong. But these are people that are struggling, who live in these neighborhoods, and they burn down these communities, okay, and go against our public servants who we care about at the moment.
Okay, Richard Painter, because you are somebody who's worked under George W. Bush, you've seen successive American presidencies through the years. I want to understand from you how, these policies have changed regarding immigrants under different American presidents. You've got immigrants coming in who do your blue-collar jobs, who serve the country, contribute to American economy. But unfortunately, would you say that they have been victims of different kinds of politics that different presidencies have seen in America?
Well, the problem is we can't get an immigration bill through Congress. President Bush tried to get an immigration bill through Congress and to allow people who've been here a long time, amnesty and a path to citizenship, and then to get other people out unless they want to go through a temporary worker program or something like that. But the bill wouldn't get through Congress. Some Republicans, hardline anti-immigration Republicans, opposed it. And of course, Democrats wouldn't want to let President Bush have any success at anything. It was all sheer politics. And that's what's going on now. Without an immigration bill through Congress, the President of the United States has some discretion to implement federal immigration policies. The courts will decide what those limits are, and the President must obey the orders of the courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States. And we have never had a president violate a Supreme Court order since Andrew Jackson. And I've attacked two left-wing professors at Harvard and Yale, respectively, who suggested that President Biden should disobey a Supreme Court order on student loans. Absolutely unacceptable, and President Biden did not do that. The bottom line is we have courts that make these decisions unless and until Congress can pass an immigration bill, and we can all debate what that immigration bill ought to look like. Many of us in the United States are descended from people who came to this country without permission of the governing authorities in this country. People started immigrating to this country from Europe in 1620. We only had organized immigration laws early after the Civil War. We need to pass a new bill in Congress to address this issue. It cannot be resolved by violent protesters on the streets. And once again, the president should not be federalizing the National Guard or setting in the Army. This is a law enforcement issue. This is not an insurrection. There are no grounds for doing that. It is extremely dangerous when the federal authorities are allowed to send in the military without the consent of a governor of the state. President George H.W. Bush sent in the National Guard at the invitation of the governor of California to deal with the riots in 1992. But this is not at the invitation of the governor, and we should not have a federalized National Guard at this point.
All right, and perhaps, all those who want the immigrants out should also be thinking whether they're willing to do the blue-collar jobs as well as the highly skilled jobs that immigrants bring into the United States of America, whether they are willing to do it and they have the kind of skills that they bring with them to America. I have paucity of time. I'll wrap it up here. David Sofair, Sarah Spencer, and Richard Painter, thanks very much for joining us on Times Now and sharing your perspective. With that, viewers, it's time for a short break. News and updates will continue on Times Now.